Well, like to look at it from a different perspective too, because it's important to understand that adding fluoride to the water supply is really, it is a drug. It is absolutely, it's a drug. There's no question. You can't try to get fluoride without a prescription. You can't do it.
No.
It's a drug. But this is the only example of a drug that is put into the water supply on a mandatory basis where a person has no choice about it, just being exposed to that. There is no other example of this. It doesn't exist.
No.
I mean, this is essentially, it's a major assault on your freedom of choice.
That's right. I mean, I'd love to go to the tap and pour out a glass of water and drink it. You know what the irony here is? That the FDA, which doesn't regulate fluoride in drinking water at all, the FDA does regulate toothpaste. Mm-hmm. And on the back of a tube of toothpaste, and your viewers can watch this and look at it, read on the back of a tube of toothpaste.
Almost any commercial. Obviously, there's toothpaste at health food stores that are non-fluoride.
But the fluoridated toothpaste, if it's fluoridated on the back, FDA required, if your child swallows more than the recommended amount, contact a poison
control center, right?
Yeah, yeah. And the amount that they're talking about, the recommended amount, which is a pea-sized amount, is equivalent to 1 glass of water. But no one, the FDA is not putting a label on the tap saying, don't drink more than 1 glass of water, or if you do, contact a poison center. So you've got this Tweedledum and Tweedledee.
How much fluoride is there in a typical size of toothpaste? How much, is there enough to kill one child?
If a child would probably be sick, vomit, long before they got through a whole tube of toothpaste. But there's no question that fluoride not an excessive amount can cause serious harm. There have been examples of children who've swallowed the gel that is used for topical treatment, and they've died as a consequence. So fluoride is extremely...
It's a poison, folks.
It
can kill you.
Yeah.
And they're putting this in your toothpaste. I mean,
yeah.
It's just almost incomprehensible. So the thought when you're using a toothpaste that it is a topical, and you know, we're going to give them this. It may work topically, and it may. There's not really definitive proof that it may, but it may. It clearly does not work systemically, and that's why there's warning on this. So the challenge when you brush your teeth is that it just doesn't stay in your teeth. There's a tendency to swallow it.
Yes, that's right.
And that's the problem.
That's the problem. And we know that there's, as far as dental fluorosis is concerned, for example, scientists have shown that there's a greater risk of dental fluorosis if your kid brushes his teeth twice a day compared to one that drinks it or uses it once a day. But going back, we're not talking about killing people outright with drinking water. What we're concerned about is the chronic.
Right. This is an example of that this can kill you. I'm not saying it typically doesn't.
It's poisonous.
But it's a poison.
Yeah. And what we're really concerned about, for example, if you take the bones, 50% of all the fluoride that you take in each day essentially accumulates in your bones over a lifetime. And it takes, what, about half-life turnover of bones? Maybe 3 times in a lifetime. So you're steadily increasing the fluoride levels in your bones. And what we know from India and China, where they have areas with high natural fluoride levels, is that the first symptoms of fluoride poisoning the bone is just like arthritis, pains in the joints, and so on. And yet there's never been a study in the United States to see if there's an association between people living in fluoridated areas and increasing arthritis rates.
I've got two points there. Now, I think you mentioned earlier that China and Japan both are non-fluoridated as countries. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes. No.
So the entire country, the largest country on the planet, China, and then Japan, a very sophisticated, technologically country, both are not fluoridated. Now, there's the other question I had on this, or point I wanted you to comment on, was the distinction between naturally occurring fluoride, the one that you mentioned in China and India, and the type of fluoride that is added to the traditional fluoride treatments in this country through the toothpaste or the water supply, the two most common sources. So I wonder if you can comment on that.
Yeah. The 90% of the chemicals used in fluoridation in the United States are not natural. It's a substance called hexafluorosilicic acid, or it's sodium salt. We'll say silicon fluorides. And these silicon fluorides are captured pollutants from the phosphate fertilizer industry. When you're making phosphate fertilizers, you take phosphate rock, heat it up with sulfuric acid to drive off the phosphoric acid, to make the soluble phosphate. In the process, it generates 2 very toxic gases, hydrogen fluoride and silicon tetrafluoride, and for about 100 years these decimated the local area, the vegetation, crippled cattle and so on, and eventually they were required to capture these toxic gases. And they used a spray of water, and that spray of water produces these silicon fluorides. That stuff, the scrubbing liquor, cannot be dumped into the sea by international law. It can't be dumped locally because it's too darn concentrated. But if someone buys it, it's no longer a hazardous waste, it's a product. And there's none of the regulations which control. And who buys it? The public water utilities buy this stuff and put it in our drinking water. It's absolutely absurd. You know, Bill Hersey from the EPA points out, if it goes into the air, it's a pollution. If it goes into the local water, it's pollution. But if the public water utilities buy it, it's no longer a pollutant. It's bizarre. So not only are we doing something quite unique, using the public water supply to deliver medicine, as you said, it's never been done, apart from one short experiment with iodine, didn't work. Never been done to do that. And secondly, we're using the public water supply to get rid of hazardous waste from the phosphate industry. It makes a lot of money for them, but of course it would cost them a lot of money to get rid of it as hazardous waste.
Yeah, so one of the things that we see in the news is the use of fluoride supplement to the water supply, municipal water supplies, from China. Now,
yes.
And I'd like you to comment on this, but it's somewhat confusing to me because it seems like there would be a surplus of this toxic material in the United States alone.
Yeah.
Is just China able to sell it to them less expensively?
Yeah.
So China's coming to the market now.
Well, two things are going on. Number one, the number of companies that were making phosphate down in Florida has reduced. There have been some problems down there, and so on. And also, China has a large supply of this stuff, and they're able to sell it cheaper.
They're a manufacturer, and they're producing these these materials.
Yeah.
And it's a toxic byproduct of their industrial process, and they want to sell it too, and they can sell it cheaper.
And one of the peculiar things that's happening is that some communities in the United States, including a town in Massachusetts, I forgot the name, have stopped using this because it was producing a sludge. It was jamming up the delivery system. It was a white sludge. And, you know, the Center of Disease Control engineers said, we don't know what this sludge is, but we know it's safe. Well, if you don't know what it is, Joe, how can you say it's safe?
Well, we can't. And actually, in our discussion earlier, we are going to seek to obtain a source of some of this fluoride from China and actually have it analyzed by some objective independent laboratories and see what's in this that is actually being introduced into the water supply of so many local American communities.
But I'm glad you've used the word natural, because they do that a lot. They say, oh, well, fluoride is just natural. It's in the water naturally. Well, you know, the natural levels are about 10 times, on average, 10 times less than we add to the water.
And the current levels in the water is 1 part per million?
The level that they use for fluoridation ranges from 0.7 to 1.2, depending upon the weather, the climate. But the word, when we're talking about natural, I think the key natural thing to look at is the level in mother's milk, baby's first meal, right? That level is up to 250 times less than they add to the water. We add about 1 part per million. The level in mother's milk ranges from 0.04 to 0.004 parts per million. So a bottle-fed baby can get up to 250 times more fluoride than nature intended for the newborn baby or for a breastfed baby.
And there's a lot of reasons why infants shouldn't be receiving infant formula.
Yeah.
I mean, breast milk obviously is the way to go, and there's other alternatives to that. But this clearly is a significant issue. And I'm wondering if you know of any known benefit for fluoride. If it's in breast milk, is it in there because it's required by the infant, or is it in there because it's a contamonant in the environment?
It's out there. So the fluorine is about the 13th most abundant element in the universe, on the planet, on the Earth's crust.
Yeah, because in aluminum we know, which is even more abundant.
Yeah.
There's no medical or health purpose. So it's a contaminant, it's a toxic poison. You want to avoid it. Is that similar to fluoride?